North Node in Libra and in the 7th house. Introduction. With your North Node in Libra in the 7th house, your North Node is doubled down in the house ruled by its same sign. This means that what you have mastered in the past you have overdone to an extreme, and it may be, or may have been, if you are further along your journey, more difficult for you than most to overcome your emotions, detach, and look at things dispassionately. If you have personal planets in air signs, this may come more naturally to you, but depending on your specific chart, it could be more challenging. Having your North Node in Libra in the 7th house means your South Node is in Aries in the 1st house. The sign, Libra, of your North Node signifies the qualities you need to develop, but the house, 7th house, indicates in what area of life you most need to express them. Likewise, the sign, Aries, of your South Node signifies the qualities you need to let go, but the house, 1st house, indicates from what area of life you most need to walk away. Qualities to cultivate. Create win-win situations, not win-lose. Cooperation and being a team player. Diplomacy and tact. Awareness of others and their needs. Selfless giving without expecting anything in return. The power of partnership. Peace. Compromise. Commitment. Patience and thinking things through. Where to cultivate them. Companionship. The alter ego. Partnerships, romantic, professional, etc., and one-to-one relationships generally. Marriage. Competitors and enemies. The shadow self. Lawyers, mediators, counselors. Contracts. Teams. Business. Qualities to let go. Selfishness and me-first mentality. Impatience, impulsivity, a sense of urgency, and rushing. Anger and aggressive self-assertion. Expecting others to be like oneself. Competitiveness. Ignorance of others and their needs or indifference to how you make others feel. Refusing to compromise or cooperate. Excessive independence. Fear of intimacy. Fear of losing power and control. Where to let go. Self-image and self-identity. Public image. The first impressions you make. How you start things. Your defense mechanisms. Your immediate environment. Your general outlook on life. Your physical appearance. Conflict. Approach to survival. Understanding the relationship axis. Having the North and South nodes in the 1st or 7th houses and/or in Aries or Libra places you on the relationship axis. It is the ascendant, self-descendant, partner, axis. It's a cardinal axis of willpower and boundaries. You may be self-motivated or self-sacrificing, insightful or ambitious. House 1 is ruled by Aries and Mars, the planet of war. Aries represents I, the ego, the infant just brought into the world, screaming its needs. House 7 is ruled by Venus and Libra, which represents the other, the partner, the self-conscious adolescent starting to consider sex and partnership. Aries is the bold, authentic person who says what they mean and means what they say, walking over others as they beeline toward their goals. Libra is the self-effacing diplomat, the one who sugarcoats the truth, gets walked on, and struggles with indecision, but always brings peace and harmony to the situation. Your life path involves balancing the self and others, being both the solo star and the best supporting actor. Me versus we is a major theme of your life. Your karmic classroom is in your relationships. Both cardinal axes, 1/7 and 4/10, deal with balancing responsibility for oneself and for others, but both can also become controlling and manipulative if we are not careful. The cardinal axes deal with power and projection, so power plays and/or projecting one's shadow onto others are signs of imbalance. With your North Node in Libra and in the 7th house, you likely have a healthy sense of self-respect, but possibly too much ego. You need to learn to pause and consider others' needs and feelings before forging ahead with what you want or making yourself the emotional center. With Libra, you have to learn to see things more objectively. Fire asserts itself outwardly, air internalizes and intellectualizes. Whenever you have a fire south node and an air north node, your natural tendency is to get stuck in an ego survival mode at the expense of your relationships. You've got to learn to pause, stop seeing everything as a personal attack, and put yourself in other people's shoes. Let go of your insecurities and learn to see others' desires as being just as important as your own, not as a threat. Love is the central power of this axis, unconditional self-love and unconditional love for another. You must see the truth of dependent arising, that what is good for me is good for you, but what is good for you is also good for me. This is about the self and its projection out into the world, and the adjustments we must make in facing and relating to other people. Your life lessons come through your interpersonal relationships and the degree to which you either assert yourself and your needs or compromise for the sake of harmony and fairness. The relationship axis is about creating versus refining, leading versus following, winning versus compromising, giving versus taking, how you see yourself versus how others see you, and self-awareness versus awareness of others. Every axis is about balance, but especially this one. It isn't about becoming entirely selfless or entirely selfish, but learning to meet in the middle. It means having self-respect as well as respect for others, including all living beings. It means knowing when to take initiative and when to wait. When you master this axis, you will have a healthy sense of self-respect, confidence without egotism, and humility without self-deprecation. Ultimately, it is about balance. Perhaps you are already on your way. Your quest, peace and harmony. With your North Node in Libra in the 7th house, your quest is peace and harmony in your relationships. Your resource for achieving it is your passion for justice and fairness. Deep down, you are not at peace with the external world because you are not truly at peace with yourself. You bring incredible strength, courage, and decisiveness into this world due to many lifetimes spent fighting to survive on your own. However, you took this to excess and became incredibly self-absorbed, having to outcompete everyone else for resources and living in fight or flight mode. Now you have become stuck in the trap of an endless search for independence that never gives you the sense of security you seek. Instead, you are meant to slow down and develop the abundance mindset that enables you to team up with others and share resources with them. The truth is that you'll never feel strong enough to be part of a team. You have to take the risk and join up with others anyway, knowing that each of your qualities will compensate for what the other is missing. You'll discover that you're better together. The irony is that it's only once you turn your attention to others and focus on supporting them, without expectation of getting anything in return, that they will give you the support and attention you crave. Only then will you feel secure and reach a state of both inner and outer peace. Your past, strengths, and excesses. Don't worry, you don't have to leave everything about the South Node behind. Again, it's about balance. The trick in balancing out the South Node is to embody the positive aspects while leaving behind the excessive and negative qualities. With a South Node in Aries in the 1st house, putting your own needs first comes naturally to you, but this is not your path this time around. With your fiercely independent South Node in Aries, you have spent past lives or your childhood as a warrior, soldier, leader, authority figure, activist, cop, firefighter, athlete, or a similarly martial person. You are accustomed to urgency, competition, and even danger. You were likely a loner, and your childhood may have left you isolated, or else you had to fight for your survival psychologically or even physically. You've been a survivalist who takes what they need and leaves others to fend for themselves. In the past, even glancing at a comrade on the battlefield could mean losing a limb or your life. Therefore, your entire consciousness was focused on yourself and your own survival. As a result, you have an exaggerated survival urge and me versus you mentality. You yearn to calm down and connect with others, to love and be loved, but you don't know how. Subconsciously, you fear that the battle will begin at any moment, and you have to be on your guard, focused on yourself and alert to every possible attack. This doesn't make you a bad person, it may be that this was the only way for you to survive. But you're not on the battlefield anymore, you're in the boardroom or in the bedroom. The same tactics will no longer work for you here. Now it's united we stand, divided we fall. In this life, you've got to learn how to turn your enemies into allies and to see your allies as collaborators, not competitors. You have a strong need to dominate situations and always be the one in power or the one who wins. But this is not a win/lose lifetime for you, it's time to create win/win situations. Because of the urgent situations you were in, you never had time for social niceties. You've been selfish and self-serving, perhaps vain, thoughtless, blunt, and fiercely independent. You always put yourself first and others have suffered because of it. You have not yet been able to strike a balance between self and other, giving and taking. Your prioritization of yourself and your own survival has left other people feeling betrayed, seeing your priority as disloyalty and selfishness. But this goes both ways. With no one to support you in the past, you couldn't trust them either. But this isn't all bad. There are some great benefits to being this way. You've been a pretty autonomous free agent who's brave, enterprising, and self-reliant. You're fiery and assertive, self-assured and authentic. You've taken a stand for your beliefs. You're a champion for the underdog. You have a rock-solid sense of self-worth and self-respect. You take initiative and you're exciting to be around. At the same time, this focus on self produces a lot of anxiety. You entered this world in fight or flight mode, and it's hard for you to snap out of it. You may be hypervigilant and overreactive, perceiving threats where there are none. This is because you were on your own in the past. Not only did you have no one to help you, but you had no one to look out for you. You were constantly looking over your shoulder, living in a state of tension and stress. Now you may be so preoccupied with your selfhood, identity, and survival that you can't relax and enjoy the beauty around you. Your focus on self is precisely what blocks your ability to succeed. This leads to intense social anxiety, due to the combination of focus on the self and not fully understanding others. You haven't had a lot of practice listening to and understanding others' points of view, so their behavior can be confusing sometimes. You may tend to avoid socializing, but this only intensifies the problem. Past lives are likely to have been masculine hero archetypes who developed courage and willfulness in order to defend the soul's right to be here. The feminine, anima, part of the psyche is underdeveloped, and you are not likely to surrender yourself or give up your independence. You're inclined to go it alone because you have no real interest in connecting with others, which you may regard as a waste of time and a distraction from your goals. You are unlikely to admit it, but deep down, you feel incredibly lonely, and this loneliness is one of the motivations for your North Node in Libra. At the same time, others are drawn to your strong sense of self. You may frequently attract people without their own clear self-identity, who latch onto yours as a way to feel safe. They may irritate you with their codependence. You can never respect a doormat. But deep down, your psyche recognizes your desire for partnership, even if you consciously deny it. Emotional intimacy can be especially frightening. You may fear relationships even if you also yearn for one, but your best relationships will probably happen when you are older and have worked out many of the lessons of your nodal placement. You're also accustomed to having space and freedom to do as you please and make your own decisions. You never had to listen to anybody, so you learn to listen to yourself. More than anyone else, you're a master at staying true to your heart, and this is one of the most beautiful things about you. This also means, though, that compromise and cooperation are a big challenge for you. Even though you can lead a team pretty well, you're not used to being a team player. In fact, you bring strong leadership capabilities into this life. People see your decisiveness and feel safe following you because you seem to always know what to do. However, sometimes what appears as decisiveness can really be impulsivity, and it's important to know when you're doing which. You can be impulsive and impatient when things don't go your way, and you don't take the time to pause and communicate in a tactful and diplomatic way, which makes you come across to others as childish. Along with that comes a fiery temper. Since you haven't been able to rely on others in the past, you haven't really tried to understand them. You may subconsciously expect others to be like you, and you may feel surprised and betrayed when you find out they're not. Disagreement can be tough on you. In fact, you may be so independent that your first instinct is to rebel rather than cooperate. This turns into rebellion for the sake of rebellion, which means, ironically, that your behavior is still defined by those outside of you rather than a genuinely authentic consideration of your options. You may instinctively resist taking advice or become irritated when others give it to you. Importantly, your selfishness wasn't always conscious or malicious, it was simply that you didn't know any better. Aries is the infant of the zodiac, the first sign, and it's not selfish because it just wants to be. As babies and children, we are innately selfish because that's all we know and it's what we have to learn before we can go out and interact with others. We must understand how to get our own needs met before we can help others. This is crucial. Even with a North Node in Libra in the 7th house, you can't pour from an empty cup. You must fulfill your own needs before you can care for others. Most of all, you have been hurt too. You have endured traumatic situations, and it's important to extend patience and compassion to yourself. The trick in balancing out the South Node is to embody the positive aspects while curtailing the negative qualities. You are tempted to embark on yet another hero's journey, but this is not your path this time around. In fact, one lovely thing about this nodal placement is that true love isn't just a fluffy dream in this life, it's part of your spiritual journey. And that may fill you with fear, even if you know deep down that it's something you want. Lifetimes of individual achievement and independence may make you reluctant to commit to another. You may have also had an incredibly self-absorbed parent or attracted such people into your life, which was to show you what it is like to be on the receiving end of your own past behavior. Treating others the way you want to be treated is a major lesson of this lifetime. Deep down there is a profound lack of trust in other people. You don't trust others to be there for you, take care of you, or even to do what is right. Therefore, you take care of yourself and don't worry about them, either. But this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You also have an incredible amount of courage, and when it comes down to it, it's likely you don't hesitate before putting yourself on the line for others. At your best, you're a fighter with a cause who protects others. You don't have to leave behind the strong warrior you naturally are, but you must become the peaceful warrior you are meant to be. Time for a new tactic. While this strategy worked very well for you in your early life or in past lives, it will now backfire on you. Instead, you need to recognize that this is not a warrior lifetime. Now you are surrounded by comrades and your job is to help them win, because when you help others, you win too. This is a partnership lifetime for you. You will fulfill your highest, truest potential through being the best partner you can be. This can be in any relationship, with friends, family, lovers, or business partners. Even adversaries. Imagine two great tennis players who constantly force one another to up their game, can be wonderful for you. Deep down, your soul knows what it needs to experience in this lifetime. Our persona is the avatar through which this higher self learns and practices the skills it needs. Deep down, you knows that when we work together we win, that you want to be fair and treat everyone equally, that harmony is the noblest pursuit. Through interacting with others, you will discover a side of yourself that is charming, considerate, and kind. With the North Node in Libra in the 7th house, you have some hidden talents. You may know some and not others. But you are actually a very compassionate person, despite what people might think. You are a great caretaker. What happens when you're around a helpless animal, a child, an elderly or sick person? In these situations you may tap into a tremendous source of empathy and responsibility. You have an innate sense of duty and a strong protective instinct. You can also gift others with some of your intrinsic confidence and sense of self-worth, and have the power to lift others up when they're feeling down on themselves. When you use these talents to help people, you will feel fulfilled. You are here to learn, and then demonstrate, the value of selfless love, to love without reciprocation and give without expectation of anything in return. That doesn't mean you won't be loved back or that the right people won't give back to you, but releasing the need to be the object of attention is the key to actually getting what you want. As with so many paradoxes of life, we only get what we want once we no longer want it. Put the needs of others first and you'll be surprised by what, and who, comes your way. In order to progress in life, you've got to become more Libran. You must learn how to play well with others and how to share. You must learn to compromise, to be diplomatic and tactful. You can't just blurt out whatever's on your mind. You have to think about how to say things in a way that won't offend others. You must learn not to put yourself first, but to put others before you. You must develop compassion for others, think of their needs, their desires, their challenges, their suffering. Ask yourself how you can help them. Ask yourself how you can be of service to others. Ask yourself how you can be of value. Developing the skill of diplomacy to create harmony in relationships is an important lesson for you. Libra is about grace and good social skills. In the past, you learned about yourself by turning inwards, but this will only stunt your growth in this lifetime. You have exhausted your capacity for independent self-knowledge. Now it is through comparing and contrasting with others that you will discover who you really are and can be. You may resist marriage and long-term relationships but secretly crave them. When and if you do commit, you'll need a lot of freedom and solo time. But through partnership you will gain everything you ever dreamed. Long-term relationships require long-term vision. That means trust, tact, diplomacy, strategy, and fairness, as well as compromise, cooperation, sacrifice, limitations, and even boredom. But it's an investment that pays incalculable dividends. One-on-one partnerships are your karmic classroom in this life. Your partners will teach you the most important life lessons, and both romantic and business partners contribute to your spiritual growth. Finding balance with them, while challenging, will fulfill you and bring you immense happiness. As you begin simply shifting your attention off of yourself and onto other people and their problems, you'll benefit enormously from a sense of relief. It turns out that sometimes our focus on our own problems only perpetuates them. Once we stop adding energy to those troubling topics, they naturally run out of energy and resolve themselves. Meanwhile, your ability to focus on someone else's problem actually helps to solve it for them, because you're more detached and able to make more rational, practical decisions. Kindness and understanding will develop naturally within you. Cultivate harmony in your relationships. Develop a more refined intellect. Be the best companion you can be, whether in romance, friendship, business, or any other kind of partnership. Try to be thoughtful and considerate. Be charming. Be elegant. And most of all, be a peacemaker. Focus on resolving conflicts instead of fueling them. As you gain experience, you will learn the power of collaboration and partnership. You will find that the right relationship is the one you build consciously, and rather than limit you, it can empower you. In this lifetime, you will not succeed if you go it alone. It's set up for you to succeed with others. Deep down inside you want nothing more than to cultivate a harmonious world. This only happens when you put others first. This doesn't mean to abandon the self, though. Remember, every nodal axis here about balance. The focus should be on creating win-win situations by balancing the needs of self and other. You will know you are making progress when you become the go-to person for resolving conflict, whether between people or within individuals, instead of being the one who starts it. What you need, and actually want deep down, is to belong and be part of a team. You want to be loved and accepted and cherished. You want to get along with others. You're tired of fighting, now you want peace and harmony. This placement is also about commitment. While in the past you were great at starting things, you didn't often finish them. Now you are meant to stick out the tough times and see things through instead of starting and abandoning lots of projects and relationships. Some things just aren't in the cards for you this time around. In this life it will be hard for you to gain independence and be self-sufficient. You will have to learn to lean on others and share. More than any other placement, you must remember that everyone you encounter is a mirror of you. Everything you admire and desire, as well as detest and dismiss, in others is also in you. Whenever you put someone psychologically above or below you, you must ask yourself how their qualities, whether you label them as good or bad, exist also in you. One beautiful thing about this placement is that a fulfilling relationship is part of your destiny. Before you begin, I cannot emphasize enough that this process of psychological evolution does not require you to completely abandon your South Node and run willy-nilly into your North Node. When people do this, they often misinterpret their lessons and go off track. For instance, early on I tried to actively cultivate the qualities of my own North Node, but I still had so many habits, good and bad, in excess, from my South Node that I hadn't fully understood or gotten control of yet. Those South Node tendencies actively undermined and inhibited my ability to pursue my North Node, even though I truly believed that's what I was doing. So instead we must first seek to understand our South Node. Every quality, and every sign, has positive and negative manifestations, depending on its context, how it is used, and how evolved the person using it is. For example, with your South Node in Aries, you're incredibly brave, but this courage can also manifest as recklessness. It's not about disowning your courage and hiding in your house so you can never be reckless again, it's about understanding when and how to leverage your bravery. Maybe you don't need to buy that motorcycle or backpack across a country whose language you don't speak, but you do need to use your emotional courage to ask out that cute person you've been seeing at the coffee shop. Even more easily, we can misunderstand the lessons of our North Node, precisely because it is the most foreign to us, unless we have personal planets in the same placement or element, which makes it easier. In your case, someone with a North Node in Libra in the 7th house may think they just need to get into a romantic relationship and prioritize their partner over themselves, but this would be an immature expression of that placement. Instead, waiting and looking for lessons about considering others' needs in the relationships they already have is a healthier and more effective way to start. Then when they encounter someone they're naturally interested in, they'll already have some understanding of how to consider someone else without sacrificing too much of themselves. Of course, this isn't a linear process. We don't check our lessons off one by one on a list until we get to the reward at the end, and we don't simply move from one end of the axis to the other, though I may sometimes write it that way for the sake of clarity. In reality, our life is our best teacher. Our life is constantly bringing us lessons and reflecting our evolutionary stage back to us, showing us what we've mastered and what we still need to learn. Even more important than anything I've written in this book is that you judiciously reflect on how the themes of your nodal axis have manifested in your life specifically and in the people you've encountered, especially when there is a pattern, and there are always patterns. And just because a lesson repeats doesn't mean you didn't get it right the first time. It often means you're now dealing with the same subject at a higher level. Pay attention to your life. Both the South Node and North Node want the same thing, but they approach the desire from opposite perspectives. In the past, we've been pursuing our soul's deepest desire with the approach of the South Node, and the experience of never really getting what we want is what builds the pressure to pursue the North Node. The North Node path does not feel comfortable, safe, or familiar to us. It may even disgust us sometimes. But life will repeatedly deny us our deep desire until we learn and integrate the missing end of the polarity, the North Node we've left underdeveloped. In your case, your instinct to fight and struggle to win only causes you to lose, until you stop competing like an Aries and start collaborating like a Libra. The only way you can win in this life is to create win-win situations where nobody loses, including you. Oftentimes we do not begin to turn towards our North Node until we've truly exhausted the strategies of our South Node. At that point, we have explored all the positive and negative effects of our South Node habits and instincts, and we're able to use them with discernment instead of compulsion. But this point may come only when we feel completely defeated by our life. Exhausted, we're finally forced to try a new strategy, and we end up gaining even more than our deep desire, more than we ever dreamed. The fulfillment of our North Node promise doesn't look like becoming an embodiment of our North Node, but instead embodying the best qualities of both the South and the North Node. Giving space and attention, communication. Unless they have other very quiet placements, South Node Aries first house people tend to have very strong, bold personalities. Their energy is so strong it can easily overpower other people in the room, stifling them and not allowing them space for their own expression. As in so many areas of life, South Node Aries first house people need to learn the art of balance. In social settings, it's important for North Node Libra 7th house people to practice giving others priority. This doesn't mean that they should silence themselves, but simply asking questions and letting others speak first before jumping in can really make the other person feel heard. Whatever we give to others, we get back, so when we make others feel heard and like they've had the space they need to express themselves, it will feel natural and fair for them to give us the same. Learning how to listen and validate others is an enormously helpful skill that will pay social dividends. When in conversation with someone, especially if they are suffering or trying to work out a problem, we can simply listen and repeat what they're saying back to them in our own words. It sounds like you feel like X. Is that right? Then they're able to either confirm or correct our understanding. As we continue to do this and get closer and closer to what they mean to say, bridging the gap between their words and our understanding, they feel seen by us, or at least like we're trying. Many people did not get the external validation they needed growing up, so doing this for someone can be very healing for them. It's only once they feel seen, heard, and understood that they're then able to receive any suggestions or even constructive criticism. But we must show empathy first. In larger group settings like parties, simply prioritizing asking questions and understanding others' points of view accomplishes the same goal. People will then be more curious about what we have to say, once we've shown genuine interest in them. This can be hard for South Node Aries first house people because they tend to be very impatient, their minds and mouths are faster than others, and it can be frustrating to listen to someone ramble forever when they could have said the same thing in far fewer words. Aries is king of conciseness, but practicing patience and listening is to their advantage. Deep down, South Node Aries first house people crave attention, and much of their anger comes from not receiving the attention they desire. While their need for attention is valid, after all, everyone needs attention in order to survive, the way they pursue it is usually counterproductive. They tend to get caught up in competition, overachievement, showing off, and hogging the spotlight, which only turns people off. They're so attuned to their own needs that they're not aware of what others feel and need, and they behave competitively in situations where cooperation would work more to their advantage. Ironically, Giving attention is the only way they will be able to get attention in this life. They have to remember that everyone has as much a right to exist and express themselves as they do. Instead of making themselves look good, they can focus on making others feel good. Others will associate their own positive feelings with a North Node Libra 7th house person and see them in the good light they desire. When they put others first, they actually come out on top. Tuning to others. South Node Aries 1st house people are often incredibly sensitive, deep-feeling people. They just don't realize that it makes them insensitive to others. They don't mean to be self-absorbed, but they can be completely oblivious to others' needs and feelings. Little considerations that are so obvious to others fly right over their heads. For example, consider two sisters taking turns caring for their elderly father. One has a South Node in Cancer in the 4th house. Her past experience as a mother has caused her to attune to others' needs, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and social needs. The other has a South Node in Aries in the 1st house and is accustomed to only tending to herself. The South Node Cancer sister will not only ensure their father takes his medicine, but make sure his sheets and clothes are clean, his bed is comfortable, the house is clean and in order, he has his favorite food, check to see if he's eaten after each mealtime, make him the coffee he likes, nag him to stay hydrated, make sure his subscription to his favorite magazine is still coming, recommend books he'd like, ensure that he can watch his favorite sports program, get him to take a walk with her every day, spend time sitting on the couch with him and chatting, keep track of his doctor's appointments, ask him the big questions of life, invite his friends over or remind him to call them, etc. Meanwhile, the South Node Aries 1st house sister, left to her own devices, would only ensure he takes his medicine and makes it to his appointments. It's not that the South Node Aries 1st house sister doesn't love their father, it just doesn't occur to her that he needs more than just basic medical care, that he has other physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and social needs. This leads to conflict between the two sisters. The South Node Cancer 4th house sister can't believe anyone could be so thoughtless, while the South Node Aries 1st house sister doesn't understand why anyone would be so invasive. South Node Aries 1st house people need to consciously cultivate compassion and consideration for others in order to avoid inadvertently neglecting them. The fact is they just don't have as much experience doing so as others, but it's okay, because that's what they're here to practice. It helps them to write down everyone they want to take care of or show love for and then consider what those people's needs and how they can fulfill them. Then they can set about doing thoughtful things for their loved ones. If they're not sure, they can ask, "Hey, how can I best support you?" Others will be delightfully surprised by their thoughtfulness. Keeping up appearances. The 1st house deals especially with our surface-level interactions, our appearance, first impressions, and manners of speaking, moving, and behaving. Today this also includes our social media profiles and any other public or online self-presentation. Unfortunately, South Node Aries 1st house people tend to put way too much attention and emphasis on these areas of life, giving themselves a lot of social anxiety. More than any other placement, they benefit from limiting their screen time and taking their focus off of their appearance. In fact, these folks run the risk of being superficial and prioritizing appearances over authenticity. This is because deep down, they don't trust that others will like them for who they really are. Instead they put up a front and cultivate an image they think will attract others so they can ensure others' support. This is part of their survival strategy. They think if I'm not attractive, I won't survive. They are very selective about the image they project and they can work hard to control it, becoming defensive when others perceive them differently than how they want to be perceived. Sometimes they engage in contradictory behavior just so others won't figure them out. They want to be interesting and unique, and resist being completely known because they fear being boring. They don't want to be like anyone else. But in doing so, they deny themselves the one thing they really desire, genuine, authentic connection. Instead, they need to live authentically, even if it means being like someone else, and trust that who falls out of their life is not meant for them, and will be replaced by people who are right for them. Decisiveness versus impulsivity and the levels of desire. One beautiful thing about South Node Aries 1st house people is that when they want something, they go for it, without hesitation. Their drive is incredibly admirable. It's not something most people are born with, but these folks are. However, they don't always realize who they're running over on the way to their goal. In fact, they don't always stop to consider whether they truly want what they think they want. In fact, this decisiveness can sometimes just be childish impulsivity. It can be a see, want, get attitude, very dangerous when they have a credit card in hand or a habit of online shopping. It helps them to understand the layers of desire. There are, of course, the superficial desires of the human animal, to seek pleasure and avoid pain. This is pure hedonism, to enjoy the whims of the physical body without regard for long-term consequences or effects on others. Then there is the egoic mind, which wishes to preserve a particular self-image, through the status of beauty, money, job, prestige, or moral high ground. This is where we all get most easily lost. The South Node Aries first house person's egoic mind usually wants to preserve their self-image as the best of some particular category. These folks are used to being winners. But this is a juvenile way of repressing the fact that we are all equal, and our equality doesn't prevent us from getting our needs met or from being special. More deeply, there is the soul or higher self, the part of us that operates beyond the egoic mind, the watcher, the observer. It's the part of ourselves we tune into during meditation, the intuition that speaks to us in whispers. This is the source of our deepest desires, the ones that transcend the egoic mind. It wants what is in the highest good of all, including ourselves. When North Node Libra 7th house people come to understand this part of themselves, and tune to that, they will see there is no such thing as you or me, better or worse, no need to judge, no need to compete. There are many resources and journal prompts to help you tell the difference included in the North Node Libra 7th house workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. When they learn to let their superficial and egoic desires pass by calmly bringing awareness into them and letting them go, they will be able to slow down and tune into their true, authentic, deep desires. From there they will be able to pursue genuine fulfillment instead of chasing their own tails. Their sense of urgency means that South Node Aries first house people tend to skip important steps in their rush to the finish line. When they arrive, they look back and realize that they left a trail of errors in their wake. Many times they have had to go back and redo a project because they didn't do it right the first time. This is another reason they need to slow down and complete each step deliberately instead of impulsively rushing through. While they can be great in a crisis, they're not usually on as tight a deadline as they think. South Node Aries first house people tend to rely on themselves so much that instead of slowing down and accepting help they alienate those who want to help them, and their impatience and impulsivity result frequently in self-sabotage. There is a difference between decisiveness and impulsivity, but it's not always easy to tell. Many times we don't know until we look back in retrospect whether a decision was brave or stupid. The same choice can appear either way depending on whether things turned out all right, and often that's more up to chance than to the rightness or wrongness of the decision. South Node Aries first house people are used to making quick calls and flying by the seat of their pants, having to trust their luck. But in this lifetime, they can't rely on luck anymore. South Node Aries first house people operate under a subconscious sense of urgency, which is very stressful to their nervous system. They live in an almost constant state of fight or flight. Often they find themselves taking action even before they're sure about their decision. What results is sometimes childish behavior and often self-sabotage. In fact, most of their miscommunication and other problems come from their tendency to not think before they speak or act. In this lifetime, it's time to grow up. North Node Libra 7th house people need to slow down and make deliberate, rational choices based on verified information and personal values. This applies to all areas of life, choosing a degree path, getting into a relationship, going on a trip, considering others before making decisions. One enormous strength of South Node Aries first house people is their decisiveness. It's part of what makes them great leaders, but like other South Node qualities, they tend to overdo it. One habit that holds them back is making decisions on their own, without considering others' input. In the past, they often had to make decisions on their own with whatever information they had at the time, and usually, that was enough. But now they simply can't get all the information they need on their own, they have to ask others for input. Only seeing things their own way is a South Node Aries first house person's comfort zone. Pushing themselves towards companionship isn't just about the warm fuzzies of relationship, it makes them a better, more well-rounded person. When they make decisions without asking others for support, they often fail in their endeavors because they haven't considered all the angles. However, when they seek counsel and take other perspectives into account, they're able to make much better decisions. Since they don't have enough information on their own, when they make decisions in a vacuum, they have to go based on their assumptions. And you know what they say about assumptions, they make an ass out of you and me. Asking other people for input doesn't mean the North Node Libra 7th house person has to abandon their own agenda and just go along with what other people want them to do. It means they can find compromise, design creative solutions, create better outcomes, or simply verify that their instincts are correct. If nothing else, by asking others for input before forging ahead, they've improved their relationships simply by showing the person respect and consideration. This leads others to trust them more in the future. This is about releasing their me against the world mentality and shifting from me to we. Deep down, they fear that others will block their actions rather than support them. They don't trust other people. This is where they need to utilize their famous Aries courage and take the risk anyway. They will be surprised who shows up. Asking others for their opinions doesn't make North Node Libra's 7th house person a follower, it makes them a more intelligent and strategic decision maker. As they begin to consider and integrate other points of view into their choices, they will make better and better decisions. Becoming a team player. North Node Libra's 7th house people may not realize it, but they're at their best when they're part of a team. When they try to do things solo, they end up stagnating because their life is asking them to work with others toward a common goal. Being part of a sports team, organization, business, volunteer group, or other joint activity will bring them innumerable rewards. It's never about needing other people because we are incomplete on our own, but about combining independent forces to accomplish even more together. South Node Aries first house people may see social relationships as a waste of time, simply distractions from their own goals. What they don't realize is that they can't achieve anything without good relationships, because every business and endeavor depends on that. Ours is a hypersocial, interdependent species. We need each other for everything, from our basic needs to our mental health to our career success. In any area of their life where they're winning, there is a strong partnership behind them, while in areas of life where they're losing, they have not yet integrated lessons around partnership. When they strike out on their own, they either fail or confront a hollow success that doesn't satisfy them because they have no one to share it with. It no longer works for them to simply work for their own ego. It helps them to define their goals as an individual, and then consider ways of incorporating others into their efforts. If their goal is to keep a clean house, how can they involve their housemates in the effort, in a way that maintains harmony and dignity for all involved, rather than ordering people around? If their goal is to exercise regularly, can they tap an accountability partner who will go to the gym with them? If their goal is to become a better cook, can they host a weekly dinner with friends or donate their skills to feed the hungry in their community? Ultimately, North Node Libra's 7th house people are professional survivors. They've already mastered this skill, so they don't need to focus on themselves so much anymore. Now it's their turn to help others by joining their team. In this lifetime they are here to help other people, to gift them with the confidence and know-how to survive as well as they have. When they teach others the fortitude they've mastered, North Node Libra 7th house people gain confidence and peace. Empowering others makes them feel great about themselves. South Node Aries first house people are natural initiators, but they struggle to follow through. Involving others helps North Node Libra 7th house people because it keeps them accountable and motivated even when they lose interest, get distracted, or feel discouraged. Again, their trust issues come into play here. They don't like being part of a team because they don't actually trust people to get the job done, especially not the way they would do it themselves. These folks are so goal-oriented that they ignore the real goal, teamwork itself. Everyone has their own way of doing things, and they need to trust that others can get the job done. Even if it's not how the South Node Aries first house person wants it done, and certainly not as fast. But when they make the process and teamwork itself into the goal, this makes everything go more smoothly, and gives them greater satisfaction than just doing things by themselves. From competition to collaboration, leading with abundance. In the past, the South Node Aries first house person was a warrior on the battlefield, literally or figuratively. They had to be focused on their own survival. The second they lost that focus, they could die. It was literally life or death. Serving themselves meant life and compassion for others meant death. They couldn't let themselves get distracted. These folks are so accustomed to having to fight to get what they want, or even just what they need, that they don't realize they don't have to fight all the time. In fact, there is an alternative strategy, diplomacy. And this time, it won't kill them. Aggression is often the default mode of South Node Aries first house people. They are so used to encountering opposition and having to struggle that they inadvertently create self-fulfilling prophecies by approaching everyone that way. To them, it looks like other people are always angry and don't want to give them what they want, but they don't realize that they themselves are often the one bringing an aggressive attitude into an otherwise neutral or even harmonious situation. We get what we expect, including a fight. This can also manifest as the mentality that they have to fight for love. Of course, this only pushes away people who might have otherwise been interested in them, because they try too hard and assert themselves and their desire too much. You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. These folks brings incredible leadership skills into this lifetime, but it's a particular kind of leadership, authoritarian. And it doesn't work that well anymore. It's not always that others don't want them to lead, it's just that others want to be taken into account before directions and decisions are made. They need to shift from an authoritarian approach to a democratic one. In fact, North Node Libra 7th house people are perfectly positioned in this lifetime to help others grow into positions of leadership. They can lead people to lead. For South Node Aries first house people, revelation comes from seeing how much more fulfilling a victory is when they achieve it with someone rather than against them. Their appetite for winning will never go away. They'll always be a warrior, but being a warrior for their partner or team, and especially for a cause bigger than themselves, will gratify them far more than winning personal glory. It's like eating a 7-course meal instead of fast food. South Node Aries first house people must recognize that every encounter is not a binary choice between self and other, between individuality and relationship. Instead, they depend upon and define one another. There is no self without other. It's essential that South Node Aries first house people learn to compromise. They resist this because they fear that if they compromise, they'll lose too much ground to the other person. In the past, they were always in win/lose situations, and they had to come out on top or they wouldn't survive. But that's not how life is this time around. Now when they operate in a win/lose mentality, even when they win they lose, because they lose the people they care about in the process. Their friends and partners just leave to find someone else who will treat them more fairly. So it's essential they acknowledge others' needs, wants, and values, and learn to create win/win situations. Life is not a zero-sum game. South Node Aries first house people are accustomed to being in scarcity games where one person's win is another person's loss, but that's not how life really works this time around. Only in the realms of sports, politics, and the like is that true. In order to be number one, you have to knock someone else out of the number one spot. But this lifetime is an abundance game. There is plenty to go around, and the more we give, the more we get. A rising tide lifts all boats. These folks have a tremendous love of life. They are often the life of the party and bring a fun, adventurous, childlike sense of play to their loved ones. When they tap into this light-hearted, abundant mindset, they uplift other people simply by being themselves. Sharing their enthusiasm brings more back to them. It's a win-win. In this lifetime, South Node Aries first house people sometimes have a profound desire for partnership. It is not satisfying to only give love to oneself. Sharing is one of the greatest joys of life. Moreover, like any other emotion, it is toxic to keep love bottled up inside. We need to share it and express it in order to maintain our emotional and psychological health. In this lifetime, successful relationships lead to all other forms of success. Healing insecurity with trust. Deep down, South Node Aries first house people have a profound lack of trust in other people. They don't trust others to be there for them, take care of them, or even to do what is right. Therefore, they take care of themselves and don't worry about others, either. But this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because they don't come into this life with a ton of relationship experience, South Node Aries first house people tend to lack confidence in this area of life. On top of that, their natural focus on themselves undermines their social and romantic confidence because it increases rather than soothes their self-consciousness. When misunderstandings occur, as they naturally do, instead of checking in with the other person to ascertain the reality of the situation, they turn their focus on themselves and make assumptions based on their own insecurities. They assume the other person dislikes something about them and is rejecting them, or else they make a harsh judgment about the person in order to dismiss their importance and move on instead of actually resolving the issue. In fact, South Node Aries first house people can be incredibly judgmental of themselves. This produces an intense self-consciousness and social anxiety that undermines their social confidence. They don't realize that sometimes the most charming thing we can do is be vulnerable and honest about our flaws. Of course, that doesn't mean trauma dumping and highlighting all our anxieties, but it does mean that when we're in the right company, we can dare to share some of our vulnerabilities. If they're not sure, they can try giving a teaser by revealing only a little and seeing how the other person responds. If the response is kind, they can proceed. If something feels off, they can stop sharing. No big deal. There are resources and journal prompts to help you practice this included in the North Node Libra 7th House workbook on northnodeSignandHouse.com. Otherwise, South Node Aries 1st House people tend to hide all their perceived flaws, which actually backfires and makes people distrust them. No one trusts someone who appears to be perfect all the time. People feel the South Node Aries person's self-judgment, so they don't feel safe to be themselves, either. But as North Node Libra 7th House person releases their own self-judgment, others will sense they are not a judgmental person, and will feel safer to be authentic around them. On their own, South Node Aries 1st House people are very self-confident, it's just that they don't trust others to see their value the way they see their own value. But when they actually show others their value by sharing it with them, instead of using it to compete against them, others immediately recognize the South Node Aries 1st House person's value. For example, their innate confidence and courage are qualities that few people possess. When they use this natural skill to empower others to be the same way, by encouraging them with just the right words or perspective they need to make a shift, others feel the North Node Libra 7th House person's power precisely because they've received it from them. Then others recognize both their own value and the North Node Libra 7th House person's value. Everybody wins. However, South Node Aries 1st House people might secretly fear that if they share their power too much, others will become dependent on them and they'll lose some of the freedom they need so much. They don't want to be drained by other people. What they don't realize is that when they support others, they're empowering people to be more independent. In reality, they are not creating codependency, but helping others achieve a higher level of independence and self-sufficiency, from which they can ultimately give back in turn to the North Node Libra 7th House person. Because they fear being drained, they don't recognize the value others can give them in exchange. This is why it's so important for them to consciously recognize and appreciate the qualities and value other people bring to the table. Nobody has it all on their own, but together we can have everything we ever wanted. South Node Aries 1st House people also fear the emotional embarrassment that they believe comes with vulnerability. The idea of being seen can be terrifying to them. As a result, when they start to feel too uncomfortably intimate with their partner, they suddenly pull away, expressing a need for alone time and independence. But this defense mechanism pops up so abruptly it alienates their partner, making them believe the South Node Aries 1st House person doesn't really care about them. Of course, this makes the partner pull away because they now feel too vulnerable, and so begins the self-fulfilling prophecy. Both partners feel too vulnerable and start pulling away emotionally. If not physically, the relationship loses intimacy, and eventually they break up since they don't feel close anymore, but more like platonic friends, even strangers. Instead of starting this cycle, South Node Aries 1st House people need to be vulnerable about their fear of vulnerability. Instead of pulling away with the excuse of alone time and independence, they need to lean on their brutal honesty and say, "Hey, I've enjoyed getting closer to you and really appreciate the intimacy we've cultivated together. But there's a part of me that's really afraid of that and feels too vulnerable, even weak. Can you help me?" When they allow themselves, they are actually one of the few signs capable of leaning into their fears rather than running away. After all, they're the most courageous of all the South Node placements. Developing patience. Oftentimes, if South Node Aries 1st House people don't get their way, they immediately leave the situation, when in reality, they might have gotten what they wanted if only they'd had the patience to stay. This is part of their impulsive rolling stone nature which no longer wins them praise and admiration, but leads to self-sabotage. This is understandable because in the past they so often had the experience that others were not committed to them. Committing to someone who wasn't committed to them only led to a broken heart, abandonment, and struggling to survive on their own. But it's important they don't project their past onto their present and create a self-fulfilling prophecy. They need to develop the patience to see things through. These folks are so passionate and their desires so intense that if they don't immediately get what they want, it feels like they have to move on in order to fulfill their needs elsewhere. But this is a lifetime to slow down and trust the process of life. For example, when they like someone, they expect the other person to reciprocate immediately or not at all. Because they are so in touch with themselves and their own emotions, they assume others are the same way. So when their crush doesn't immediately reciprocate, they cut ties and move on to someone else. The same thing can happen with a job or a whole community. In reality, other people may be slower than them, either because it takes others longer to process their own feelings or simply because they are more cautious. Oftentimes, if the South Node Aries first house person had had the patience to wait, to build a friendship first, to allow events to unfold naturally, their crush would have eventually approached them with a love offer. Much of South Node Aries first house people's grief in this life comes from opportunities they missed simply because they didn't have the patience to wait and see. The flip side of this issue is that South Node Aries first house people lack the patience to truly investigate their own feelings and desires. They feel something, therefore it's true and they should go for it, but should they? Perhaps they could learn from others' slowness and cautious attitudes, which is a hallmark Libra quality. In the example with their crush, if they had the patience to slow down and gather more information before deciding they liked the person, they might have realized they were just projecting and making assumptions, and that they actually don't like the person at all. Instead they move on impulsively, believing they missed out because their crush didn't like them back right away. But they forget to investigate whether they themselves actually liked their crush, or if it was just an illusion. While North Node Libra 7th house people are here to learn how to commit to others, they shouldn't do it in their characteristically impulsive way. They must make deliberate, considered commitments based on ample information that reveals itself over time. Otherwise they run the risk of impulsively committing to someone they don't know well enough, or running away because others didn't commit to them immediately. Their view of social relationships, and especially love, can be childishly naive in this way. Deep down, they believe in love at first sight. It's not that they have to give up this belief, but they need to pair it with the mature perspective that waits to ensure their instincts are correct. Only then can they make a mature commitment. As a result of this impulsivity and resistance to commitment, these folks can be classic one-night stand people. With their past life military experience, they are accustomed to making a conquest and then moving on to the next battle. Love and sex for them can be a competitive game, and they are motivated by challenge, always bored by what they've already accomplished. For them, it's all about the thrill of the chase. Of course, this sequence of superficial interactions leaves them very lonely. Deep down, their soul wants to commit to someone and stay long enough to build a life they can share together in peace and harmony. They are tired of the battles. Another part of their fear of commitment stems from their fear of being wrong and facing the emotional embarrassment of admitting it. They don't want to look foolish to others if and when a relationship ends, so much so that they'd prefer not to try. In these cases, their concern over what other people think of them is defeating their basic need for a partner. Their pride is stronger than their passion sometimes. Even when they do have a partner, that partner often isn't good enough for them. They don't accept their partner for who they are. This is a very sad situation in which they project their own standards and anxieties onto the person they're supposed to love most, and over time their criticism wears down the person's confidence. In such situations the South Node Aries first house person can be a dangerously toxic partner, but this is an extreme manifestation of the placement. Still, anyone with South Node and Aries in the first house must be careful to guard against this tendency to hold their partner to their own unrealistic standards. Commitment versus excessive independence. South Node Aries first house people tend to be introverts. They don't have the constant need for social validation that others seem to have, and which they consider a weakness. However, even though they're self-sufficient, deep down they do want a partner even if they don't feel they need one. They may resist long-term relationships and other commitments, even to jobs, friends, and places, just because they are so uncomfortable with getting too attached. They fear the loss of freedom, independence, and self-sufficiency they have worked so hard to develop. South Node Aries first house people tend to fear supporting others because then they will become responsible for that person and create codependency, which will keep them from their Rolling Stone lifestyle. They fear being tied down and losing their freedom, but isolation will only hurt them in this lifetime, ultimately causing them to lose the very freedom they desire. For example, without a partner to share in the tasks of maintaining a home, they may lose a lot of their time to chores instead of dividing the labor with someone. In between the extremes of independence and codependency lies the perfect balance they should aim for, Healthy interdependence. This is a relationship lifetime for North Node Libra's 7th house individuals. They've already experienced extreme independence, so repeating that path will only result in continuing to lack deep connections with others. Instead, they need to make interdependence a conscious choice and commit to cultivating it. Sometimes South Node Aries 1st house people marry or have an unplanned pregnancy early in life, which teaches them how to stay committed to someone else. If they are unconscious, they will blame that person for ruining their life, even though they chose to enter into the marriage or to keep the child, who after all, didn't ask to be born. These folks use their resentment as an excuse to avoid becoming fully involved with the very people they supposedly love. It frustrates them that there are no quick and easy solutions. Their fear of codependency can keep them out of healthy relationships. They often don't understand the difference between codependence and interdependence. Their fear of codependency is unnecessary, however, because they are so naturally self-sufficient it's improbable that they'll ever give up their power completely to someone else. And as long as they are discerning in who they choose as a partner, and focus on empowering the person rather than coddling them, they don't need to worry about their partner depending too much on them. As long as they focus on cultivating interdependence, they will be able to experience the joy and fulfillment of being both vulnerable and secure with a worthy partner. Sometimes they make the mistake of empowering their partner to become as independent and self-sufficient as they are, only to have their partner leave them. This is crushing, because they devoted so much energy to building the other person up. But intention matters, and sometimes when they build someone up it's for the wrong reasons, so they can be with a true equal and enjoy mutual autonomy, 50-50 trading, and self-containment. This results in a loveless coupledom based on expectations, rewards, and demands, a transactional relationship devoid of nurturing. Creating another version of themselves is just narcissistic. Instead, their intention should be to build a relationship based on genuine emotional intimacy, connection, and mutual support and sensitivity to one another's needs, desires, and values. People leave them because this is what's lacking, the emotional intimacy. True interdependence means that partners take each other into consideration, care for one another, compensate for each other's strengths and weaknesses, and look for ways to be helpful before they're asked. When they make the relationship itself the goal, and see themselves and their partner operating as an interdependent unit, they succeed. Anger. South Node Aries 1st house people tend to have a childlike temper, with little control over themselves and a subconscious determination to get their way by manipulating others with their tantrums, controlling people through fear. Of course, this only isolates them from the very people they want to be close to. Their loved ones shut down, withdraw, and only placate them in order to avoid the consequences, thereby undermining the honesty that South Node Aries 1st house people so value. Eventually people feel they cannot be honest or open with a South Node Aries 1st house person and walk on eggshells around them, always hiding their true feelings. What the South Node Aries 1st house person thought was a win-lose situation that they won turns into a lose-lose situation for both people. The truth is that anger never wins, it only alienates. Anger is often rooted in a violation of our expectations. We get angry when we don't get what we expected or believe we deserve. Sometimes the anger isn't justified because our expectations were incorrect. We thought we had a right to something or someone, but we don't. For example, someone may take their crush out to dinner and expect their crush to kiss them after, but this would be tantamount to purchasing sexual favors. The person has no right to be angry. They should take their crush to dinner because they want to, not because they expect something in return. Their anger in this case isn't justified. However, there is such a thing as righteous anger, when we truly deserved something and didn't get it. In these cases it is healthy and reasonable to express our anger, as long as we do so in a calm and mature way that doesn't demean others. For example, someone's spouse might promise to be home in time for dinner and then not show up until midnight because they worked late at the office and never called or texted to let them know. In this case, the person's anger would be justified, a promise was broken, and when they see their spouse, they can explain their feelings in a measured way. But it can be very difficult to distinguish between justified and unjustified anger, because the egoic mind will manipulate us into thinking it is always justified. For example, anger often takes the form of moralistic indignation, which is propped up by vanity and pride, especially when someone wrongs us. We hang on to the anger because, after all, we are in the right, we are the victim, and the other person is in the wrong. But when we look more closely, we will see that not only do we not want to forgive the person, but we don't even want them to apologize or make things right. We prefer the egoic satisfaction of being right and making someone else wrong over resolving the conflict and making peace. We don't want to resolve the issue because then we wouldn't get to be in the morally superior position anymore. We enjoy being on top. The mere presence of conflict, or lack of resolution, creates a hierarchy we get to sit on top of. If we made peace with the person, then there would be no more hierarchy, and we would no longer hold a position of moral power or superiority over them. Of course, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Many medical studies have shown how clinging to our resentments creates tension and stress in the body with very real consequences to our health. Not to mention the fact that we will never get what we want as long as we cling to our petty resentments. So what can we do? We must surrender, piece by piece, the little egoic satisfactions we get from being right, being the victim, being the better person, being morally superior, being on a higher level of consciousness, and so on. Very often, the morally superior position is the only satisfaction we have. It is our sad consolation prize for having been wounded, sometimes deeply wounded. It is our safeguard against the grief and pain we really feel beneath our shield of pride and anger. There are many resources and journal prompts to help you do this included in the North Node Libra 7th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. As in physics, even psychologically and energetically, every action is met with an equal and opposite reaction. The internal position we hold about others forces them to adopt a complementary, defensive position. That is why when we try to force outcomes, other people resist. When we try to control others, they rebel. When we chase, they run. And as long as we hold on to our morally superior position, they resist making amends and maintain their inferior stance. Even though deep down, in a place more profound than our egoic mind, that's all we really want. It is only the ego that wants to be right. These folks will not be able to resolve their anger until they confront what's underneath it, fear. We are attached to something that we fear losing, a relationship, a job, a feeling, our ego, etc. Very often it is our ego we are attached to, which is how pride fuels anger. When our pride is wounded, we are moved to act against whomever wounded it. Very often this comes in the form of the sacrifices we believe we are making for others, even though they never asked us to or because we didn't speak up and assert our boundaries in the first place, and so our resentment builds and builds until we lose our temper. The pride of self-sacrifice fuels our anger, because we fear the diminishment of our ego. However, repressing anger does not work. We need to use our anger for positive action. After all, it is a step up from apathy and grief. Anger can propel us into taking action for what we want. It can recommit us to our ambitions, fuel us to prove others wrong through our achievement, leave a situation that isn't working for us anymore, or dedicate ourselves to our own self-care and self-improvement. More deeply, they must identify and address the feelings that are fueling their anger. They need to become aware that they are unconscious injustice collectors, which builds up a victim mentality and the anger that spews from it. But anger is not freeing, it is binding. As long as we hold on to our anger and the underlying feelings, we will continue to attract people and situations that trigger them. Conflicts. After many lifetimes of war, the North Node Libra 7th house person's soul craves peace. More than likely, they did not have harmony and peace in their early environment, and they are stuck in this inherited pattern. They are accustomed to having to fight for resources, including love. They tend to see life as a battlefield. It is in interpersonal conflicts that the ugliness of South Node Aries in the first house will reveal itself. In an argument, these folks may shout the other person down and shut them out. They may block the person's number and stop talking to them for weeks. They become aggressive and self-righteous. In the worst cases they may become violent. But the truth is that they never win when they do this. They might think they do, but they don't. They emerge with a victorious smile, but they have not won anyone over to their side. No one likes them, no one agrees with them, no one respects them, and no one admires them when they behave this way. In getting their way they have won nothing. With the North Node in Libra in the 7th house, it is important for them to find ways to calm down and release tension. They must allow beauty and harmony to heal them. Knowing themselves, they must learn to deal with stress and tension before it causes them to explode. Whether it's physical activity, a calming cup of tea, or a creative hobby, they must find an outlet for their pain before it turns into anger. Their greatest challenges are actually their greatest opportunities. Who gets on your nerves? Who is always frustrated with you? Who calls you selfish or a brat or a tyrant or just plain bossy? Who do you always fight with? Consider the ways in which you might have been selfish and stubborn with these people. Consider how you can serve them, help them, please them. In doing so, you will ultimately help yourself too. South Node Aries first house people's default approach to conflict is to push buttons and fight to win, without ever pausing to ask why the conflict began in the first place. These people were warriors in the past, but they weren't the sovereigns who declared the war. They just did their duty on the battlefield and fought regardless of whether they believed in the cause. But now, theirs is not to do or die. They finally get to reason why. It's essential, therefore, for North Node Libra 7th house people to pause before engaging in conflict, and begin with questions rather than accusations. They must seek to understand before trying to be understood. They should ask why the conflict arose, who started it, what their motivation was, how they feel, how others feel, what the facts are, and what kind of outcome would feel fair to all involved. Libra is associated with the symbol of the scales and with justice. North Node Libra 7th house people need to take on the role of an impartial judge, seeking all the available information and understanding all angles of the case, not picking sides of the plaintiff, defendant, or lawyers. The great strength that South Node Aries first house people have is that, unlike Libra Sun or Moon folks, they're not afraid of confrontation. They're less likely to be indecisive or run away. When it comes to conflict, they're brave and strong enough to handle it. They just need to complement their courage with empathy, insight, and forethought. Acknowledgement. Acknowledgement is one of the greatest keys to harmonious relationship. It is not a merely superficial saying like, "Thanks for washing the dishes." It is about seeing the hidden gift of even the behavior that appears most negative. We so often go through life with a mental list of all our little acts of loving kindness that others have not acknowledged or appreciated. But if that's what's going on in our minds, our loved ones must surely also have a mental list of their own loving acts that we have failed to acknowledge or appreciate. Practicing acknowledging others' value and contributions, even if they're not in the form we most want or readily notice, helps to both prevent their resentment from building and alleviate our own. Because once we stop to notice and voice our appreciation for others' acts of love, we realize that they have actually been reciprocating our affection all along. Even when someone hurts us, perhaps especially when they hurt us, we have an opportunity to learn. This doesn't mean we should stay with people who chronically hurt us, or with abusers. But when someone who we know loves us does or says, on rare occasion, something hurtful, we must pause and ask ourselves what there is to learn here. If we constantly use this method, we will see that everyone in our life is a mirror. They are always reflecting back to us what we have failed to acknowledge within ourselves, for better or worse. What aspect of our egoic self needs to be relinquished? What aspect are we failing to acknowledge and appreciate? This means that we have to constantly let go of our pride in order to undo anger, so that we can be grateful for the continual opportunities of growth with which our interactions and relationships present us. To do this, we have to resist the temptation to make ourselves and others wrong. This type of black and white judgment, this moral positioning, is one of the ego's favorite activities, not only because it engenders pride, but because it frees us from the guilt of making necessary changes. Discovering self through other. Identity is contextual. We are different people in different times of life, in different places, and most of all, in different company. When we enter a relationship, we get to discover who the other person is, but we also get to discover who we are when we are being with them. This is an essential truth of our hypersocial, interdependent species, as well as the truth of all life on this planet. Everything and everyone depends on everything and everyone else. Self is defined by other, other is defined by self. It is one singular process, only our own perception mistakes the unity for separation. It is through relationship that we discover ourselves. More than any other placement, these folks will truly experience, again and again, the hall of mirrors that life can be. Everyone in their life is reflecting back to them a truth about themselves, and it's up to them to see it. Don't like that person? Why? Maybe they have something you don't and you want it, whether it's a possession, a quality, a relationship, attention, etc. Or maybe they do something you think is wrong, because secretly, you wish you could do the same and get away with it. Or do you love and admire someone greatly, putting them on a pedestal? They likely embody some of your own repressed qualities that you could cultivate in yourself. When South Node Aries first house people have strong emotional reactions to others, whether positive or negative, the emotion is always trying to teach them something about themselves. Our quality of life depends largely on the quality of our relationships. But having good relationships isn't just a matter of luck and who we meet, it's about the level of awareness we bring to every interaction. Seeing others as equally complex, intelligent, and valid as ourselves, even if they're nothing like us, is the first step. We must seek to understand before we insist on being understood. If we want something, we have to give it first. Trying to understand others, without changing them or denying who they are, is key. The fact is that everybody is their own unique person and has different strengths and weaknesses. It pays dividends for North Node Libra 7th house people to recognize their own weaknesses, and acknowledge others' strengths, especially when those strengths differ from their own. Cultivating appreciation for others is crucial. In fact, they must re-examine their definition of strength and expand it to be more inclusive and mature. For example, emotional vulnerability is an incredible strength. Only someone who is truly strong in themselves has the courage to be emotionally vulnerable instead of hiding their feelings out of emotional cowardice. Communication skills, empathy, playfulness, analytical skills, diplomacy, sensitivity, and compassion are just some of the strengths that people bring to the table. In the past, South Node Aries first house people observed their enemies from a distance and made assumptions and judgments about their character, values, and future actions. In this life, they continue to use the same method of judging from a distance without actually getting to know people. They don't understand why other people do things differently than they themselves would do them, or why people are always sabotaging their own success. In failing to appreciate others' unique strengths, South Node Aries first house people fail to recognize their own. They don't realize their unique talents and strengths and how rare they are. Not everyone comes into this life with the same skill set, and everyone learns different strategies along the way. Everyone also has to face their own obstacles in life and fight their own battles. They don't all have to approach them the South Node Aries way. This can be frustrating, especially when North Node Libra 7th house person has to watch someone they love struggle. Of course, it is appropriate to step in and help when they've been asked or when it seems right, but other times they have to let others figure out their own way of dealing with things. While they should offer to help, they should also step aside if the person doesn't want their help, or if their way doesn't work for that person. Also, they must recognize that not everyone has the same goals they do. Starting with a question instead of an assumption always helps. The shadow. South Node Aries first house people encounter their biggest life lessons through relationships, particularly one-on-one relationships. This could be a romantic partner, a best friend, a single parent, a business partner, even an enemy. The 7th house is a house of projection in which we easily project our own repressed traits, good or bad, or more often, neutral, onto other people. South Node Aries first house people likely attract very Libran types, people who are diplomatic, polite, selfless, and considerate, but who may irritate the South Node Aries person with their indecisiveness, passive aggression, weakness, and secretly selfish manipulation. Oftentimes, South Node Aries first house people are so wrapped up in their own identities that they project their identity onto the other person. Then when the person inevitably acts differently than they expect, they feel betrayed. The thing is, they need to take responsibility for their own projections, reel them in, and get in touch with who the other person actually is. Very often, their perception of someone is based on the role that person is supposed to play in their lives, and their sense of justice is violated when the person acts contrary to that role. But oftentimes, the other person never actually signed up to play that role. North Node Libra 7th house people have an innate sense of justice, equality, and fairness. In fact, the only time they lose their temper might be when their sense of justice has been violated. However, their standards may be too rigid and in fact, out of touch with reality. When they allow their sense of justice to cloud their judgment and get on their high horse about it, they are actually off track. Folks with the North Node and Libra in the 7th house really struggle to admit when they're wrong, not realizing that self-righteousness is the true root of all evil. Think about it, no one who has ever done anything truly evil has not felt that they were justified in their action. In contrast, real humility means admitting when you've been wrong, made a mistake, or willingly hurt another. Real humility is admitting you're not perfect and you're not always on the right side of history. What these folks don't realize is that the very urge to be a good person is often what makes someone a bad person. It makes them self-righteous, repressed, and blind to their own flaws because they're not willing to accept humanity in its wholeness, which doesn't involve only pretty, nice things. They want to live only on the light side, but it is this very impulse that leads human beings to evil acts, because when we repress our shadow, we lose our awareness of it, and therefore cannot guard against our darker impulses. Admitting our darker impulses and negative qualities to ourselves is actually the most helpful thing we can do, for ourselves and for others. To continue living in denial is deeply juvenile and immature. North Node Libra 7th house people can't usually handle blame. They might apologize for superficial mistakes or accept blame in order to keep the peace, but within themselves, they tend to remain self-righteous. The lesson of Libra is to see the light and the dark of human nature, and accept that it exists within all of us. We are therefore all to blame, and none to blame. We all deserve forgiveness. People on this axis tend towards a quintessential failure of grace. It may be very difficult for the North Node Libra 7th house person to extend compassion to others and forgive them their mistakes, to love others in spite of and even including their darkness, but they also struggle to extend the same grace to themselves. Accepting their own dark side is tremendous work, and tremendous growth, for them. Forgiving and loving themselves, including their shadow, is perhaps the biggest leap they can take towards true maturity and spiritual ascension. There are many resources and journal prompts to help you integrate your shadow included in the North Node Libra 7th House workbook on northnodesignandhouse.com. Developing social grace. South Node Aries 1st house people tend to be blunt, abrasive, and quite rude. Their impatience and sense of urgency, along with a disdain for fake social niceties, causes them to degrade the value of politeness and social poise. They often offend people without meaning to, and may simply think that they are just not nice people. Eventually they give up trying. Of course, there is a difference between being kind and being nice, and it's the latter that South Node Aries 1st house people dislike. But they are actually very kind-hearted people who want to do their best in most situations. It's not that they want to upset people, they just want to get the job done. What they neglect is the fact that they can get it done faster and better by taking the time to actually show their kindness rather than hiding it inside themselves. Internally, these folks know they have good intentions, and for them, that's enough. They don't need or expect to be understood by others who might misinterpret them. But this is a lifetime of learning to care, not just about others' perspectives, but about whether or not others understand them and their intentions. Although they can have a blasé attitude towards other people's feelings, they care more than they let on, and it does bother them when they know they've hurt someone, even if they repress that guilt. They naturally drain others, hurt their feelings, or make them angry, and this has an effect on them emotionally and psychologically. North Node Libra 7th house people must fight the urge to give up on socializing and go off on their own. They must develop patience and emotional understanding, primarily with themselves. Then they will be able to patiently slow down and figure out why they affect others the way they do, and how to adapt their behavior to make both themselves and others happier. It therefore behooves North Node Libra 7th house people to smooth out their rough edges. They can even apply their competitive spirit here. Other people are winning the social game and getting what they want, so why can't North Node Libra adopt some of their winning strategies? The same headstrong determination that has helped them achieve so much in the past can now help them learn and apply a whole new set of social skills. A big part of South Node Aries 1st house people's communication problems comes from their tendency to not think before they speak. Their tongues are often faster than their minds, depending on their Mercury, and another skill they must learn is to pause before they speak or send a message. Simply developing a practice of pausing and taking a deep breath can do wonders for their social life. Sometimes South Node Aries 1st house people will have to apologize, which is so not fun for them. It's not in their nature to think twice or regret what they've said or done. They easily shrug things off and let insults roll off their back. In fact, they're incredibly tough people, so it surprises them when others are more sensitive and care so much what people say. This is a great strength of Aries. They are not easily offended or influenced by the prattle of other people. But they must understand that not everyone has their thick skin, and words can hurt. So when they see they've hurt someone and didn't mean to, they need to apologize. Even if they don't regret what they said or even see the problem, apologizing shows the other person that they value the relationship and the person's feelings. In this lifetime, tenderness and consideration go a long way. Once they commit to developing their social grace, North Node Libra 7th house people discover they're incredibly popular. Helping others find their happiness, not through people-pleasing, but through generous empowerment, brings them immense happiness, and attracts people who make them happy, too. No one can resist someone who sincerely wants the best for them. Overpowering others. South Node Aries first house people have such strong identities, and they are so in touch with their own feelings and desires, that it's easy for them to accidentally overpower weaker, less decisive folks who don't know what they want. Oftentimes wishy-washy people will be drawn to the South Node Aries first house person's strong character and latch onto it because they lack their own identity. So when it comes to figuring out whether they're on the same page, the South Node Aries person is automatically sabotaged by the other person's weakness. They say outright what they want and the other person just goes along with it because the South Node Aries person seems so strong in their opinion, while the partner either doesn't feel strongly enough or doesn't know what they want. This backfires later when the partner realizes their desires actually were never aligned. Sometimes they even blame the South Node Aries first house person for convincing or coercing them when that wasn't their intention at all. This can feel like an enormous betrayal for the South Node Aries person, who was simply enthusiastic and certain about what they wanted. They need to be on the lookout for weak-minded, indecisive personalities like this. To guard against them, they can hold back from saying what they want until they ask and find out what the other person wants first. Only then will they know if their desires are authentically aligned. If the other person doesn't know, it may be beneficial for the South Node Aries first house person to withhold their ideas until the other person figures themselves out. Otherwise they can accidentally persuade them. Other times, these folks simply have an entitled attitude. They tend to take things personally, perceiving the slightest request for change as an attack on their ego. This makes them come across as highly sensitive, not in a good way, and others have to walk on eggshells around them. This makes it impossible for people, especially their loved ones, to be fully honest with them, which dooms their relationships. The need for justice, rules, and compromise. Both Aries and Libra have a strong need for justice, but Aries pursues justice through aggression while Libra, of course, pursues justice through tact and diplomacy. South Node Aries first house people are here to learn the latter method. Fighting for what's right is only going to backfire in this lifetime. In a stereotypical example, Aries would take revenge through violence while Libra would take someone to court. Another issue South Node Aries first house people face is that they have their own internal set of values and rules, and they assume that everyone else not only knows them but agrees to follow them. But as they discover, this is not the case. Everyone has their own value system, their own set of internal rules they're following based on their family, culture, personal values, experience, choices, and more. Sometimes when South Node Aries first house people think a situation is unfair, it's because others aren't following their rules. The thing is, they don't get to dictate what the unspoken rules are for other people. Their own rules are no more valid than anyone else's. Instead, North Node Libra 7th house people need to shift from their dictatorial approach to a democratic approach. It all starts with communication, voicing the hitherto unspoken rules. They can start by asking others what they think the rules should be. It might surprise them, because others might already share similar rules and values or might inspire new ideas in the North Node Libra person. This helps them expand their own value system as well as build trust in the relationship. With a healthy foundation of trust, everything else becomes easier and more harmonious. The symbol of Libra is Athena, goddess of wisdom, holding the scales of justice. Libra is about being fair, balanced, and objective, and achieving peaceful resolutions before conflict can erupt. Balance will be, and perhaps already has been, a major theme in your life. Perhaps you've been treated unfairly, you've probably treated others unfairly too. Now is the time to learn a better way. Cultivate your ability to stop and look at situations objectively, considering all sides of the matter. Instead of taking what you want, choose what is right and fair for everyone. I knew a Libra stellium who, when watching the news, would switch between the conservative channel and the liberal channel, watching how both sides covered the same topics, or covered completely different topics according to their respective agendas. They were always dispassionately observing what both sides thought and felt. People don't typically extend trust until they feel understood. Ironically, it is South Node Aries first house people's tit-for-tat mentality that often leads them to create unjust situations. They often think that whatever they're doing, their partner has to do with them, even if it isn't right for the other person to do so. For example, maybe the South Node Aries first house person is stronger while their partner has a hard time gaining muscle and can't carry a heavy load. Still, the South Node Aries first house person will insist their partner carry as much luggage on vacation as they do, because that's what's fair. But it isn't fair when it's much easier for the South Node Aries first house person than it is for their partner, who struggles to keep up. This is where learning to appreciate differences comes in. Maybe they can carry a heavier load, but their partner is better at organizing. A fair compromise would be for the South Node Aries first house person to carry more of the luggage in exchange for their partner packing and unpacking it. This is what interdependence really means, being able to rely on one another's strengths and play as a team. When they do give, South Node Aries first house people need to avoid tooting their own horn and using their generosity to place themselves above others or to get something back. This is the opposite of generosity, it's self-aggrandizement and manipulation. By demanding recognition, they've effectively annihilated their own gift. To give without expectation of anything in return is the real definition of generosity. When they give properly, it opens the channel for them to receive in return, and others will be able to reciprocate genuinely and sincerely only when they don't feel obligated to do so. South Node Aries first house people will be surprised what they receive when they learn how to give justly. In fact, they'll often realize that the satisfaction of helping someone is all they needed to feel fulfilled. In this life, North Node Libra 7th house people must learn that in order to receive, they must give. In order to be loved they must love, unconditionally. In order to feel strong they must be vulnerable. In order to get what they want they must first give others what they want. In order to be valued and appreciated they have to value and appreciate others for who they uniquely are. Only by doing this can they form effective partnerships. It's important for South Node Aries first house people not to dictate or create expectations around what they will receive, because their vision limits the possibilities rather than expanding them. Once they release expectations, life can shower them with gifts they wouldn't have imagined on their own. They have to follow their hearts, not their scorecard. As long as it feels good for them to give, they're on the right track. They just have to be honest with themselves, and others, about how they feel. From separation consciousness to unity consciousness. At the heart of every religion and spiritual faith, and even of physics and biology, is the knowledge that all that lives emerged from a single source, whether we call it God or the singularity that preceded the Big Bang or life itself. This vague idea is almost universally agreed upon. What Buddhism calls unity consciousness is not only the intellectual awareness of this inherent oneness, but the emotional, psycho-spiritual experience of it, and it is the subject of enlightenment. Yet we are all born into physically separate bodies and raised in cultures and societies that teach us separation consciousness, a state reinforced by our egoic minds and their instinct for self-preservation. This is the belief that all we are is separate from other people, other animals, the earth itself, and the universe at large. When it comes to the nodal axis of astrology, it is my belief that some have a harder time accessing unity consciousness than others due to past lifetimes spent in survival mode and attachment to material reality. These include the Earth's south nodes and some of the fire south nodes, including the south node in Aries in the first house. Due to having spent so much of their past fighting for themselves and their own survival, it is harder for them than for others to slow down, step back, and see the big picture, that we are all part of the same whole. It is important for these placements to strive for the experience of unity consciousness. They can do this through meditation, reading spiritual and philosophical texts, listening to spiritual teachers, spending time in nature, and more. It is not that we should deny the reality of separation, though. Separation consciousness is often dismissed as an illusion of the physical world and egoic mind, but we incarnate separately for a reason, to learn our nodal lessons, to evolve consciousness, to ascend spiritually. We are here precisely to experience separation. The ultimate fulfillment of spiritual awareness may just be that both unity and separation are true, and to hold both states of consciousness simultaneously as we move through life, elevating neither one over the other but learning to live as both. Appreciate the gold. Before we conclude, I want to remind you to appreciate the gold in the shadow of your south node in Aries in the first house. You are innately independent, and this gives you tremendous advantage in a hypersocial, hyperconnected world, where most people go astray by listening to external authorities and pressures. You have a strong inner compass and can be emotionally independent, when you're not being emotionally avoidant. You're much less vulnerable to social pressure than other placements, and it's easier for you to lead an authentic life. Others have a lot they can learn from you. In today's shame-based society, your innate confidence and sense of self-worth can be incredibly instructive to others. Even if you don't see yourself that way, other people likely do. You come into this world with a fierce mask that makes people perceive you as tough, strong, confident, and independent. And that's an incredible gift you can share with other people. You'd be an inspiring mentor, motivational speaker, or self-help thought leader. Because you know your own intrinsic value, you can teach others to believe in theirs. This is one of the greatest spiritual gifts we can give. You are tough as nails, with a high tolerance for risk, discipline, and deprivation. You have tremendous capacity for taking constructive action and thrive under pressure. You gain great personal validation from overcoming challenges, which makes you almost unstoppable. Encountering weakness in other people is very frustrating to you, because you are capable of enduring so much more than the average person. Our South Node isn't only about what we get wrong or do to excess, it also includes what we've mastered and can teach to others. No quality is wholly good or bad, but each one has both a light and a dark manifestation. Once we learn how to express our South Node in a healthy way with good boundaries, aware of its dark side, we can reach back for the gold in the shadow and share its light. We can teach others the skills we've mastered, leading by example and helping others learn their Aryan lessons. Once it is balanced, our South Node also becomes the foundation for our North Node. As with everything, each archetype contains the seed of its opposite, like the yin-yang symbol. It is precisely because South Node Aries first house people have a strong sense of self that they are able to turn their understanding outward and tune into the uniqueness of others. It is through this balance they can finally achieve the sense of peace and belonging for which their soul deeply yearns. Further practice and inquiry. I hope this ebook has been illuminating for you on your personal quest for growth. In all my work, my goal is to help raise the collective level of human consciousness. We are each responsible for doing so, by taking responsibility for our own individual piece of consciousness. With the information I've communicated here, I hope you feel more empowered to take care of your own. I wish to communicate a few more things to look for which may be helpful. First, I didn't just want to dump theory on you. As I wrote these ebooks, I realized there were so many references, books, videos, podcasts, as well as reflection questions and practical actions, that could help you think and problem solve in even more ways, in ways I didn't have the space to delve into in this ebook alone. Conscious of the fact that reading theory is just the tip of the iceberg, I wanted to give you practical ways of applying your new knowledge to your life specifically. That's why I created a workbook for each nodal placement on northnodesignandhouse.com. Recommendations for books, movies, videos, podcasts, and more provide food for thought and explorations of the Aries first house/Libra 7th house themes. Journal prompts and activity recommendations lead you off of the screen and into the world, where you can be empowered to make a difference in your own life. Even though this book series on the node specific to sign and house is a huge leap forward in the collective project of astrological study, each chart is so completely unique that there are still more factors that may influence your specific experience. For some, the path is easier, for others, it seems to be blocked at every turn. While I don't want to overwhelm you with information, focusing simply on the information above is already an enormous project. If you ever feel blocked or confused, here are a few keys in your chart to consider. First, consider your big three, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, in context of your nodal placement. Ask yourself, why would a soul with these nodal challenges choose a personality with these big three? For example, a North Node Libra 7th house is most likely to have an Aries ascendant, and let's say they have a Capricorn Sun with a Pisces Moon. With an Aries ascendant, the midheaven is likely to also be in Capricorn, so the Sunday may be in the 9th or 10th house and the Moon may be in the 11th or 12th. Clearly this person still needed to complete some of the lessons of Aries, so their early life likely engendered some of its themes. But they needed the sensitivity of a Pisces Moon to experience the compassion required for Libran qualities to develop. The Capricorn Sun indicates the need for a strong ego, which also counterbalances the weak ego nature of the Pisces Moon. With the midheaven in Capricorn, as well as the Sun placed nearby, career is important to this person. With the strength of their ascendant and South Node, they are likely to be a pioneer or thought leader of some kind. Yet the North Node indicates the need for diplomacy, cooperation, and partnership, including in their career, and the Pisces moon only helps them attune to others. This person is therefore well equipped to balance a compassionate emotional nature with a healthy ego that can assert itself in the world. Second, consider any aspects made to the nodes, less than 4 degrees. You can find plenty of articles online by searching for any relevant aspects, but for the sake of simplicity I will note here that harmonious aspects, trines and sextiles, help, conjunctions challenge, and squares indicate a skipped step, a karmic lesson one completely missed and must redo. In our hypothetical Capricorn Pisces chart, let's suppose the Capricorn Sun is squaring the nodal axis. Remember, an aspect to one end of the nodal axis is simultaneously an aspect to the other end, the Sun representing ego. The challenge of the ego is even bigger for this person than others with this nodal placement. In light of the South Node in Aries in the first house, the Capricorn Sun's ego is likely to be overdeveloped, and in the 10th house, there is an intense need for recognition from the outside world. A Cancer Sun might also square the nodal axis, but the challenge would be different. They are likely to have an underdeveloped ego and err on the side of excessive compassion. Depending on the moon and other aspects, their ego wants to hide because it fears being seen. Third, the rulers of the nodes carry enormous weight. In your case, the South Node is ruled by Mars and the North Node is ruled by Venus, which is another reason your nodal lessons play out in romantic relationships. The houses of these planets indicate challenges and opportunities, respectively. For example, let's say our hypothetical Capricorn Pisces person has Mars in Aquarius in the 11th house, likely sextile their South Node and trine their North Node. In the past, they would have felt a particular need to assert themselves in the world, but their efforts produced too many conflicts with other people and thwarted their goals. They still carry this urge into this life, making the lessons of their Libra North Node even more important. Even so, the harmonious aspect Mars is making to the nodes indicates this placement is not entirely hurtful. In fact, it concentrates their go-getter energy, Mars, on the collective, 11th house, and their means of self-assertion can actually be quite detached and calm, Aquarius, once they tap into it. Meanwhile, let's say their Venus is conjunct their Pisces moon in the 12th house. This makes their need for harmony and relationships even more essential to their emotional well-being. But in the 12th house of hidden things, both their lunar and Venusian natures are hidden in the subconscious, difficult to express openly and outwardly. While they feel deeply, it's hard for them to express their compassion and sensitivity. Their North Node in Libra in the 7th is inviting them to bring their compassionate and loving inner nature out of the dark. It would be the task of many lifetimes to interpret every possible configuration of Big Three, nodal aspects, and nodal rulers in combination with each nodal placement. It has taken me many years just to write these 144 ebooks on the signs and houses of the nodes. But I hope this example has given you a clue of how to suss out any additional challenges or blocks your particular chart may represent. If you're not sure, I recommend finding an astrologer who specializes in the nodes and can interpret your chart specifically. If and when I am personally available, I will make it known on the website. Famous North Node Libra 7th House individuals. Learning about the lives and choices of your fellow travelers can help you see both healthy and unhealthy ways of leveraging your South Node wisdom and pursuing your North Node purpose. H.G. Wells, Michael Jackson, Shakira, Joan Baez, Annie Besant, Warren G. Harding, George V of the UK, Sophie Turner, Monica Cruz, Ringo Starr, Richard Pryor, Pier Paolo Pasolini, Bianca Beauchamp, Ivan the Terrible, Wayne Dyer, Alexander Graham Bell, Herbie Hancock, Alfred de Musset, Jason Alexander, Victoria Crown Princess of Sweden, Richie Valens, Alan Wilder, of Depeche Mode, Jeannie Longo, Alison Janney, Brian De Palma,